Hi everyone, welcome to Parenting Insight. My name is Esther Kinuthia, psychologist at Parenting Insight. So today we're going to talk about cognitive development in children, and we're going to focus on the work of Jean Piaget, who is one of the founding fathers of psychology, and he was a Swiss psychologist who observed children and noted that children they interpret the world differently from teenagers and from adults. And we're going to start off with a very simple experiment that you as a parent can actually do at home, especially if you have children in the early years, that's 7 and below. So what basically this experiment is about is just goes to show that this is actually an experiment to show one of the characteristics of children in one of Piaget's four stages of development. The second stage, which is pre-operational, but it also goes to show that cognitive development is real, and that cognitive development affects how children see the world and how children translate what they see and how they make sense of what they see and how they conclude, how they reach conclusions about basically everything. So what I did is, let's say if I'm working with a 4-year-old, because this is an experiment you're doing with a child. So let's say I'm working with a 4-year-old, I fetch 200 ml of water, make the jar is calibrated so the child can be able to look at the digits and confirm and also see the water levels. And then I pour in the first glass, I measure the same amount, 200 ml, and pour in the second glass, okay? And then I ask the child if both glasses have an equal amount of water, or if one glass has more water than the other or less than the other. And then they look at the glass, the two glasses, highly likely also put the glasses together, because that's the reason why they're clear, you can see through, so that the child is not imagining, and because it's different when you're looking at something from the inside and you can see from the outside. So, and then they're able to tell that they'll say they have equal amounts of water because they can see the water levels are similar. Okay, then I tell the child that without altering the contents in this glass, that means I'm not going to add water or reduce the water in the glass. I'm simply going to transfer the amount of water in this glass to a different looking glass. And then now I ask the same child if one glass has more water than the other, or if they both have the same amount of water. And the child looks at both glasses and again probably puts them together and then notices that this seems to have less water than this, and they're going to say that the chances are that they're going to say that now this glass has more water than this, simply because the water level seem to be a bit different. I wish this glass was wider then, so that the water levels would be significantly different, but sorry, this is all we have for today. Okay, so that just goes to show that what is common sense to perhaps a teenager or an adult is not necessarily common sense to a child, simply because how they process information is very different. For you as an adult, you'd be able to know that even if the water may seem different, the fact is that as long as I have not added or reduced the amount of water in any of the glasses, the water levels may appear different because the glasses may have different width, different height, but each glass still has 200 ml of water, which is called logic. But for a child in the early years, they are not able to apply logic to that extent. For them, what they see is what they conclude. They are not able to compile all those other factors like, so if I didn't reduce the water in this glass, how come it appears less? They're not able to synthesize all the facts and put them together and come up with a logical answer. Okay, so the second stage is, the first stage we said is sensorimotor stage, where children use their senses and movement. The second stage is pre-operational stage, which is between 2 years to 7 years, which is where this kind of reasoning, where even when you show a child something, they're still not able to compile all the facts to make a logical conclusion. So they'll still say that one glass has less water than the other because it appears to have less water than the other. That's preparational stage. In this stage, children use a lot of imagination and they use a lot of symbolic thinking. So imagination, we all know, children between 2 years and let's say 6-7 years, they're very good with imagination. They have imaginary friends, they have imaginary situations, they can talk to imaginary people, they can come up with imaginary names. Like, the imagination is limitless. imagination is really key. They role play a lot because they can imagine things, and for them, when they imagine something, they experience it like it was happening in real life, and that is why even role play is very important in terms of teaching children. And then the second thing is symbolic thinking, where they start understanding that symbols mean something. So, for example, if you're teaching if you're teaching numbers to, let's say, a 3-year-old, it's one thing to teach them. Let's say if you're teaching them, how to count from 0 to 5. It's one thing to teach them how to say the number, say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in sequence. Even that is important because the sequence doesn't change. It's a constant all over the world. But then it's also important to teach the child that numbers mean something. It's not just a rhyme, it's not a song. It's numbers mean something. So it would help to teach the child how to say the numbers in sequence from 0 to 5, but at the same time, even better is to accompany that lesson with something visible and tangible. So, for example, you could have 6 containers, and in one container have nothing, in the second container have 1 grape, the third container 2 grapes, 3 grapes, 4 grapes, 5 grapes. Okay, so that then the child, first of all, is able to understand that 0 means something, 0 means nothing, because when they look at the container, it's empty, and then they understand that 1 is something. But also when they look at the second container, they see that it's 2, then they understand that 2 is more than 1. Then they start conceptualizing quantity, because without understanding the symbolic meaning of things, think about it, would be difficult for you to conceptualize, to understand time. It would be difficult, because then how do you say that 2 p.m. is after 1 p.m. or is later than 1 p.m.? How do you say that 200 Kenya shillings is more than 100 Kenya shillings if numbers mean nothing? Okay, so symbolic thinking is very important, which is why when you're teaching children in the early years, we use a lot of manipulation, because they need to understand the meaning of things. They need to understand the symbolic meaning of things. Okay, then the third stage is concrete operational. This is children between 7 years and 11 years. So here they're able to use a bit more logic. So chances are, if you ask a 7-year-old and above, if one of the glasses has more than the other, they'll be able to remember that the water measurements were the same. It was 200 in both glasses. The only thing I did is I poured the water from this glass to this glass, so the amount of water in each glass cannot have changed. It may look different, but it still is actually 200 ml. Okay, they're able to apply some logic into how they interpret life and how they interpret everything around them, though not fully, but they're able to put some logic into it, which is why they're able to do a little bit more complex math work. They're able to comprehend a bit more when it comes to reading, because they can reason logically. They're able to debate a few topics, for example, with a parent, and because a bit of logic has been developed. Then the last stage, the fourth stage, is the formal operational. This is 11 years and above. Now here is where, of course, logic is even more developed, but also one of the key elements of this stage is abstract thinking. Abstract thinking is the ability to think of things that are not visible and they're not tangible. It's the ability to think of things that are not. It's the ability to think of things that are not there. The ability to think of what ifs. Okay? Abstract thinking is what helps you plan ahead. It's what helps you come up with a project as an adult or as a teenager, come up with a project and think of situations around this project and think of what ifs and be able to imagine different situations and come up with solutions and be able to compile it and actually come up with something that's practical, even if it doesn't yet exist. So that is abstract thinking. Now again, in as much as abstract thinking, formal operational stage, which is where abstract thinking is developed, in as much as it's 11 years and above, it still doesn't mean that an 11-year-old is capable of reasoning at a logical and abstract level as that of an adult. Of course, as the years go by, then they have more to work with, which means, again, as parents, it's important to also be sensitive to the fact that even when an 11, 12-year-old is able to do an abstract project, for example, school project, they still need a lot of help, because there are limitations to what they're able to do, but then again it increases, the ability increases over time. So the 4 stages, again, for us to run by them is sensorimotor stage, 0 to 2 years, pre-operational stage, 2 to 7 years, concrete operational stage, 7 to 11 years, and formal operational stage, 11 years and above. Okay. Why is knowing about cognitive development important? It's important because it's everything. From a personal level, as a mother and as a mental health professional, I feel like I literally cannot imagine interacting with children without cognitive development coming into play. Like, there's absolutely no way that you can make sense of a child's behavior, a child's capabilities or lack of abilities at different stages, how children just evolve as they across the years, without explaining cognitive development. Okay. So I think cognitive development is everything. It's everything in parenting, it's everything in formal learning, it's everything in how children interact with each other. It's everything about a child's life. And if we don't understand cognitive development, I feel like it just, first of all, it would be very unfair for children, because that means nobody understands them. We are all interpreting information from an adult perspective, which is not how children see the world. Cognitive development helps us as parents be able to know how to support our children. It helps us as parents know that if you have a child in the early years, it helps to have to give them manipulatives, whether it's to add. So if you want them to add 1 plus 3, then you give them manipulatives, so they can have, for example, 1 pencil and then plus 3 pencils. So 1 pencil and 3 pencils, and they're able to add. Those are simple manipulatives. But it means that you understand that because they have not reached the ability to think abstractly, it's very difficult for you to expect that child to do the math offhand, to do 1 plus 3 offhand. A 3-year-old is not able to do 1 plus 3 offhand. That's the average 3-year-old. Of course, appreciating that they're gifted children and they're children across the spectrum. So this is just on average. It doesn't mean that it's not possible for a child to fall outside of that zone. Okay. It means cognitive development means that when you're helping a child unlearn behavior that you don't think is positive and learn positive behavior, it means that you understand what that child is capable of doing and how they process the information that you're giving them, because approach is everything. Okay, just the same way you cannot expect 3-year-old to calculate, to do addition work, math, numbers, addition work offhand, because you understand that they're not capable of imagining things to that extent. Is the same way even when you're approaching things like discipline, you factor that in, so that even when you're teaching a child, correcting a child, the approach you use for a 2-year-old is very different from the approach you'd use probably for an 8-year-old. It has everything to do with formal learning. It has everything to do with the approaches that are used in schools by teachers, by us parents, as we are helping our children with their schoolwork or whatever. It has everything to do with approach. Okay, so actually, if I would say cognitive development has everything to do with approach, in terms of your approach with your relationships, with your different aged children. It has everything to do with the approach of learning and which approaches you can apply at different age groups. It has everything to do with what a child is capable of understanding. It has everything to do with children. Okay, and then I'm going to mention 4 key components of that children use to make sense of the world. Though I'm not going to go through them, I'm just going to mention them. But because we're making subsequent videos on the same topic of cognitive development, I'm sure in one of the videos I will be able to break down these 4 components that children use to interpret the world. So one is assimilation, where children are able to, whatever they know, they're able to add on to it as they go about the everydays. They see things, different things, and they start adding on to onto whatever knowledge they have, because that's part of development. You just keep taking in from the world and getting new knowledge. That is assimilation. Accommodation is where now, because you have added new knowledge into what you already knew, sometimes you realize whatever you thought is not actually like cast on stone. So you have to accommodate new facts about life. So assimilation is adding new information, and then accommodation is where you realize that some things are not cast on stone and there are different dynamics to life, and so you accommodate that new information even if it doesn't fit the initial image or what we call a schema, the initial your initial reference of a situation was. You're able to accommodate it. And then adaptation is where you're able to use this new information that you assimilated and accommodated. And then adaptation is where you're able to realize that, okay, there's this perspective to life. And then now you can be able to integrate it as part of your everyday life. Okay, so this video is already long enough, so I'm going to stop at that. So just to recap, 4 stages of development as according to Jean Piaget. This is sensorimotor stage, pre-occupational stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and formal operational stage. The 4 stages of development, we will be going through each of those stages in the videos that I'll be doing next. And in each stage, I'm going to be looking for very practical examples to give, literally like examples that even when you sit back as a mother, you think, as a mother or as a parent, sorry, I'm talking about mothers because I'm one, as a parent or as a caregiver of children, you look at it and you think, wow, things that you do not see the cognitive development at work, but they actually, once you start looking at children's behavior and their everyday from a cognitive development perspective, then suddenly so many things make sense. And you find yourself starting to relate with children and to view children very differently. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, Parenting Insight, so that you're able to know when we put up videos on so many topics. The topics on children and parenting are so many. I feel like they're unlimited. And don't forget to like our Facebook page, Parenting Insight. Please feel free to post your questions, your comments, your observations, and any conversation surrounding child development that you feel like you'd like us to focus more on. So again, thank you. So see you on the next one.